Hey there, folks. It's time for Commissioner in the Car, or almost time anyways. I just logged in a little early so I can get this rolling, get people to log in, see if anybody wants to chat. Today, we're going to be talking about the end of the petition process and the different things that are going on with different primaries that we know about right now. And we're going to talk about what comes next with the petition process, with the challenges and all of that. There's a lot, there's a lot on, to talk about. So, but I'll give everybody a few minutes to log in. I'm a couple minutes early. Hello, David. I see you're here with us. We missed you last week, and I'm going to start getting into these again, doing these once a week if I can. Because we're going to start seeing a lot of activity. We are now in election season. Now that the petitions are in. Now that we know who the candidates are. Now that we know where the primaries are. We're going to see now, and I'll talk about this a little bit right now. We'll talk about the calendar, because the calendar is different. Primaries are now in June, not in September. Petitions are in April, not in July. So we have an extended election period. Is Paul Pierce greater than Dwayne Wade? Well, I'm a little bit before. Yes, he is. Paul Pierce. Hey, I'm a Celtic fan. Paul Pierce was better than Dwayne Wade. I don't care if you don't like it. I don't care. You know what? And what I loved about Paul Pierce and Dwayne Wade is Paul Pierce does think he's better than Dwayne Wade, and he believes it. And he probably, would back it up, just like Larry Bird of old. So, all right. But no more basketball. We're going to talk about petitions. We're going to talk about all the things that are going on with petitions. We had a huge petition turn-in week this week. Started April 1st through 4. And so we had, I believe, over 450 different candidates file petitions in the month of April. For designating petitions. 250 different races were filed. This is why it's the busiest week at the Board of Elections. I think it's even busier than going up to Election Day, because all these people are coming in, filing petitions, trying to get on the ballot. And, it's this culmination of a 6-week period that people were out there walking the streets, going to their neighbors, asking them to sign on petitions so we could see what, who's the candidates. So the Democrats, and I'm going to stick with the Democrats here, Republicans filed petitions in most of their towns. They only have a couple caucus towns. The Democrats this year had a few towns that came on board and did petitions instead of caucuses. Lysander and Manlius joined Salina and Marcellus and Spafford with the 5 towns that filed petitions, and they all filed slates of candidates to run, and they all were, filed enough petitions, way more than what they need to get in. I'm very proud of those towns, and because especially the new ones like Manlius and Lysander, who came on and we're going to do petitions even though it's earlier in the session, and they went out there and walked petitions not just for their candidates but for their county ledge candidates. And the Democrats put up I believe 15 of 17 county ledge races they are competing in this year. The only ones that are not are the 13th and the 14th. That's too bad. But there are 15 of 17 races the Democrats are competing in the county ledge this year. And a full county-wide slate is out there. County exec, district attorney, county comptroller, and county clerk. This is the most candidates filed in the petition process for the Onondaga County Democratic Committee that I remember. And it's really amazing that this was done in a time where we had an earlier petition process. So I'm really excited that this was done, that these candidates are out there. Like any process, it wasn't easy, but it was done. And, and I believe that you're going to, that we're going to see these candidates on the fall ballot. Can people still mail in petitions, David asked? Yes. Well, it would have had to have been mailed, postmarked on April 4th. It has to be received by Monday. So Monday is the last day we're going to really, truly find out whether any candidates are added to this field of candidates. And so on Monday, we will find out. But more than likely, we've already got all of the petitions in. So we know where the primaries are. So where are they? On the Republican side, there are 3 primaries in the town of Cicero, in the town of Lysander, and in the town of Tully. They all have supervisor Republican primaries in those 3 races. There was not a Republican petition filed for DA. So there is no Republican primary for DA. Gary Levine filed petitions for the Independents and Conservative Party. He has yet to accept those petitions. An acceptance has not been filed in our office, so we don't know if he's going forward or not and what's happening with that. But petitions were filed. But the town supervisor race in Tully, the town supervisor race in Cicero, and I believe a councilor out there, and the town supervisor race in Lysander, Republican primaries happening. Democrats, of course, have primaries as well. We'll start with the city of Syracuse. There's a primary for Syracuse Common Councilor at Large between Michael Green and Stevie Thompson and Rita Panaglia. It's a best of 2, so you get to choose the best of 2. In the Syracuse Syracuse School Board, there's a best of 4, and there's 5 candidates running for school board, and that is Katie Soljewicz, Mark Muhammad, Dan Romeo, Twiggy Ballou, and Tamika Barnett are all vying for the school board. The best 4 will get that. And then there are county legislature primaries. In Onondaga County Legislature, 7 between Joey Chirenza and Mary Kuhn. In Onondaga County Legislature, 9 between Peggy Chase and Gina Elive. In Onondaga County Legislature, 15 between Bill Kinney and Missy Ross. And in Onondaga County Legislature, 16 between Charles Garland and Vernon Williams. So those are the primaries that are happening in the Democratic Party. So there are primaries throughout the city of Syracuse for Democrats and into the parts of the towns of DeWitt and Geddes. And for Republicans, there are Republican primaries in the towns of Tully, Cicero, and Lysander. And I believe I got everything, and I'm sure somebody will let me know if I didn't. The Democrats actually outnumber the Republicans in number of candidates during the designation process if you leave the towns out of it. And the reason I leave the towns out of it is because the Democratic towns, most of the Democratic towns are caucus towns, which means they're going to meet between now and July and have a caucus to put their candidates in. So there's a lot of candidates yet to fill on the Democratic side for that. But if we leave the towns out of it, we're looking at the city of Syracuse and the county legislature and the countywide offices. Democrats have actually filed more candidates than Republicans because the Republicans on the county legislature side did not compete in the in several of the city districts. I believe in the 8th, the 17th, and the 16th. So there was 3 districts where the Republicans did not compete, as opposed to 2 districts where the Democrats didn't compete. Common Councilor at Large, they didn't. They put up candidates. They did put up 2 candidates, although one of them has already declined for Commissioner of Education. So they put up a couple candidates for Commissioner of Education. One of them's already declined. So we don't know how many candidates they're going to have there. So there's less candidates there. And of course, for the councilors, the district councilors 1 through 5, they only put up a candidate in the 1st district, and they did not put a candidate up for auditor. Oh, I forgot. Yes, there is also a primary for city auditor. Right now between Lonnie Johnson and Nader Maroon. Both of those people filed petitions for city auditors. So that's another citywide primary that's happening on the Democratic side. So somebody asked, what's a common councilor at large mean? A common councilor at large means they run citywide, as opposed to district councilors, which run within the districts there's 5 districts throughout the city. You may have seen some talk about independent redistricting. Well, that has to do with the common council districts that are around the city. There's 5 of them, and those lines change every 10 years based on the census of where they fall. But basically, you have a north side, a center city, an east side, a west side, and a south, a southern district. First district is in the north side. 5th district is on the east side. 3rd district is kind of the southern, valley area district. 4th district is on the in the center of the city, and 2nd district is on the west side. So those are the district councilors. The most important race there for Democrats is that 1st district council between Jay Sabini and Joe Carney. That's the race that's going to be the most competitive on the citywide on the general election, because that race has always been competitive. There always is a couple hundred votes between them, and it's the last Republican Republican held office inside the city of Syracuse. So that's a very important race, I think, for both parties. Republicans want to hold on, and of course the Democrats would like to have a sweep. And of course it's very important to the 2 candidates that are running as well, Jay Sabini and Joseph Carney. Joseph Carney is a 2-term incumbent, and Jay Sabini is new. But I'm, Jay is going to go out there, and just like every other race that, these races, the last 4 times the 4th district has come up, it's been within, dozens, maybe a couple hundred votes. So this is always going to be a close race. I don't take positions on primaries publicly. I got to vote just like anybody else, although I think I'm lucky. I don't have to vote on any of the county line primaries where I live. I just have to vote on the city primaries. But my view on that is let them out, let them go fight. And, and then we come together and support whoever's the party nominee, after the primary, and make sure that we try to, take back that county ledge and keep city government in Democratic control. And is anyone running on minor party lines? That's a good question, David. Yes, everybody's running on some minor party line. I don't think there's any candidate out there that only has one line so far. There may be one that I'm not sure of. But most people are running on other lines as well. That's what's called fusion voting. Fusion voting is where you allow people to run on different party lines and fuse those votes together at the end of the day on election day to count up all the votes, and that's who wins the party. Most of the time, the Republicans have the conservative and independence line and the Republican line, and Democrats have the Democrats and working families line. But sometimes the conservative flips, sometimes the independence flips, but rarely. Usually that's how that lines up. Yes, there is talk about ending fusion voting, and that is out there, but that will not happen this year. Fusion voting is in effect for 2019, and that would be something that might change next year, but I really don't know whether it's going to change at all. Mo asked, what about only minor parties? Yes, the Green Party filed several candidates for county executive, common councilor at large, and 16th county ledge at this point. So the Green Party has 3 candidates out there that are only running on the Green Party line. And, hats off to the Green Party, because they are only running on their line. They don't cross-endorse Democrats. They don't cross-endorse Republicans. They won't cross-endorse somebody who's running on another major party line. They are anti-fusion voting, and they are living that up. They are true to their word on that. So my hat off to them, because what we're seeing with the Libertarian Party is they've already announced that they're cross-endorsing candidates after saying last year that they weren't going to do that. So the Green Party has stuck to their words. The Libertarian Party, so far in their first year, and their nominations come out later this fall, they're already cross-endorsing. So that's what's going on there. And then there's the SAM Party, the Save America movement, that former Mayor Stephanie Miner ran on for governor. That's an official party. They in the Libertarian Party, because this is their first year as a party, where they have 50,000 votes, they do not walk petitions because there's nobody enrolled in the parties, or they don't have a chance to get people enrolled in the parties, especially in the Sam's case. Then they get to put people on by nomination. That will happen 7 weeks before the general election. It can happen tomorrow, but they have until 7 weeks before the general election. So sometime in September, we'll know which candidates are on the Sam line and the Libertarian line this year. Next year, they'll have to start walking petitions like the rest of us, or caucusing in towns. So that's what's going on with our petition process. So that's the candidates we know of right now. But there's a challenge process that is going to come up starting next week. Actually, it's already started. Some challenges were filed on Thursday and Friday to start the challenge process in about a dozen or so races. These are what are called general objections. General objections mean that you're just generally objecting to a petition, buying yourself 6 or more days to look at them and get enough challenges to knock somebody off the ballot. So I don't really worry about general objections because we get a lot of those every year. Very rarely do they actually turn into specific objections, and even rarer than that do they turn into specific objections that actually can knock off somebody off the ballot. But they will. Every year we do get at least one person who gets knocked off the ballot because they didn't get enough signatures in or didn't walk them the proper way and somebody challenged them. I don't know what that's going to be this year. I don't actually look at the petitions when they come in outside of what we call our 4-corner rule at the Board of Elections. That means we look at the form, make sure it's valid, and then look at the petition itself, make sure the person's enrolled in the party, that kind of stuff. We don't even count the number of signatures to get on the ballot. So, that is up to the challenge process. And that challenge process will start next week. By the end of next week, or at the very latest, Monday, the 12th, will be the last days to file specifics. So we'll know which races are going to go through the challenge process. The Board of Elections will then, in a bipartisan manner, go through each challenge, rule on them, and then notify the candidates. Then we also have a hearing, and by the middle of April, end of May, beginning of May, we'll have gone through the challenge process, and we'll definitely know any candidates that are knocked off the ballot through that. There's also a court process that people can go through, either to appeal a ruling to get thrown off the ballot by the Board of Elections, or to go to the court and bypass the Board of Elections to get the court to throw somebody off the ballot. All court cases have to be in by April 18th. So once we get by that day, we'll know if there's any court cases, and I'll keep you in the loop about that. So next week, on my Commissioner in the Car, we're going to talk a little bit more about what challenges are out there and that may or may not result in candidates thrown off the ballot, because we won't have ruled on them, probably won't have even looked at them next Sunday. But I won't go into the specifics because we're going to be doing that in a bipartisan. I'll just be letting you know exactly what challenges are out there. Now, David asked a good question, and that's what does opportunity to ballot mean? And that is a question that has been out there in the past. And opportunity to ballot is a way to get on a minor party line if you did not have their endorsement. So let's say you wanted to be on the Independence Party line, but you didn't get the endorsement of the Independence Party. Then you have to do what's called a write-in campaign, or opportunity to ballot. Those petitions start getting filed next week. The 11th will be the last day to file opportunity ballot. So next Sunday, I'll let you know whether any primaries were created in those type of races. We always have a couple of those every year as well. In those races, only members of those parties can vote in those races. So it's important to know that you're in that party. Now, you do have to have an authorization to run on a line if you're not enrolled in that party. So, and that's what's called a Wilson-Pakula, because that's named after the court case that brought about that procedure. So that keeps Republicans from running on Democratic lines or Democrats running on Green Party lines without doing what's called an OTB, which creates a write-in campaign. And write-in campaigns are hard to win. You got to have people go in, write the name of the candidate in, and if there's an authorized candidate, their name appears on the ballot next to a blank box. And the write-ins sometimes win, but it's rare that it happens. So it's hard to win. But that's why the major parties don't have it all that much. But the minor parties, especially ones with lower enrollments, will tend to have this more often. You see it with conservatives and independents and working families parties, opportunity ballots. Although we have seen, because of the scourge of fusion voting, that we've seen Republicans downstate do opportunity ballots, and also here in Onondaga County to run on the Green Party line, because a lot of times the Green Party doesn't even have a candidate on there. So they file a petition to do an opportunity ballot on the Green Party, get a couple of their friends to vote that are registered in the Green Party to write them in, and they get that Green Party line. The danger with that is if you open up an opportunity ballot, anybody can write in their candidates. So their opponents, Democrats, can write in candidates as well. We saw that happen with the family court judge race a couple years ago, where the Republicans filed to run on the Democratic line, and in a judge's race, it's not a write-in, it's a full primary. And the Green Party was very upset about that, but there was nothing they could do to stop it. So that's one of the reasons that many of us, like myself, are advocates for getting rid of fusion voting, to keep this kind of ballot rating from happening, line rating from happening. And we're seeing that more and more throughout the state, especially with Republicans doing this, because, there's fewer and fewer Republicans that are registered in New York State in many areas, and they are looking to get these other lines to be able to get victory. So that's something that we've seen throughout the state. It's become more common in the last couple of years, and it even has happened here in Onondaga County. So I kind of went over the petitions. Opportunity ballots, they're going to be filed next week, so we're going to know about whether there's more primaries. We know about the primaries that are going on. Challenges will be filed next week, so we'll know if there's any races where the challenges are going to affect the primaries and or regular elections, to see if anybody gets thrown off the ballot. It's very hard to get thrown off the ballot. You really got to do something wrong to get thrown off the ballot, because the technical things like not putting the right street name on there, or saying like place instead of Ave, or not having a middle initial and that kind of stuff. The courts have been very liberal in accepting what petitions are. So usually people get thrown off the ballot by doing one of two things: having people walk that are not enrolled in the party or not notaries, or not going door to door and going to like street corners and that kind of stuff, and getting people on the street to sign to say they're Democrats, say they're Republican, and they end up not being Republicans or Democrats, so thus they don't have a valid number of signatures. Those are the people that have been thrown off in the past. There have been cases of hyper-technical things where, like, maybe a witness thought they were enrolled in a party and weren't, or signed a petition for somebody else, for the opponent, and then went out and got signatures afterwards. Those are things that can throw somebody off the ballot. But for the most part, it's those first two scenarios that happen. Again, and if candidates don't like what a Board of Elections rules, if we throw somebody off the ballot and a candidate doesn't agree with our decision, even after the hearing, they can go to court and appeal those decisions. So that's what's going on. I have a lot of stuff going on, a lot of reforms going on. By the end of this month, the Board of Elections is going to announce our early voting sites. We are pretty much, down to our final few. That we are going to choose 6, and my Republican commissioner and I have done a good job of working together on this. I'm really excited about this. We're hoping to have a good service for Onondaga County for our 300,000 voters to be able to go vote and have the early voting. We're then going to start choosing our vendor for electronic poll books. Our plan, with the money in the budget now, is to have electronic poll books in every polling site in Onondaga County this year, in 179 polling sites, a full conversion that we're going to get rid of the paper poll books, retrain all the inspectors. And that means if you want to be an inspector, give us a call, 315-435-VOTE, VOTE, or go to our website, ongov.net/elections, and sign up as on the inspector tab. We need inspectors. We need people that are willing to work with these new poll books. They're very intuitive. I think anybody can do it, even our older inspectors. They're very easy to do. But this is the future, and the future is now. We are moving on into the 21st century, and it's really going to help us on the back end of elections. We're going to be able to find out turnout throughout the day. This is something that is amazing. Everybody calls me throughout the day and says, "How's turnout?" I say, "I don't know." But now with these electronic poll books, if we have connectivity, we'll be able to tell where the votes are at certain times of the day. Also, we'll be able to tell wait times, so we can see if we have to get extra staff over there. Here's a good question. David had a good question. Are you willing to take inspectors who are not R's or D's? Can you be in a minor party or unaffiliated to be a poll worker? We always take the application. So whether you're not an R or D, we will take the application. Right now, the law says you have to be a Republican or Democrat to be an inspector. But we have such shortages inside the city of Syracuse, especially, of Republican inspectors that a lot of times we're taking minor party, non-enrolled conservatives, that kind of thing, and deputizing them as Republicans throughout the day. So far, I have not had to do that with the Democratic. There's enough Democratic volunteers. However, in the towns, sometimes there can be shortages, and we will have backups that are assigned throughout the day as our things. Usually we have a shortage of inspectors, period. So there's not really like we have a whole bunch of people out there not getting in. But we do have a lot of people who say, well, we only want to work at our polling place down the street. Well, if people have been working there for 10, 12 years, you're not always going to be able to get in there. So I hope, we're looking for people that are flexible, willing to travel. And the primary this year is noon to 9 on June 25th or 26th. I can't remember. It's one of those 2 days. Last Tuesday in June, or the fourth Tuesday in June, which happens to be the last Tuesday in June this year. And then we have, of course, the polling places and then the general election, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. Part of the budget is next year, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. on both primaries and general election. And, of course, we have early voting hours that we need inspectors for the November election, March 25th, or June 25th. Thank you, Martha. I knew I was off. But I know it's the fourth Tuesday. I remember that. I just don't remember the day. Full primary start for upstate next year in the presidential primary, which is yet to be set, but it's going to be sometime in March or April. So the presidential primary, the June primary next year will be 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. throughout the state of New York. So that's going to happen. But it won't happen until next year. So the primary this year is noon to 9. So those candidates that are involved in primaries, make sure let your voters know that. And there's no early voting this year either for primaries. That starts next year for primaries as well. So this year's primary is old school rules. No poll books, no electronic poll books, June 25th. No electronic poll books, no early voting, noon to 9. It's a throwback primary. It's the last of the old primaries happening on June 25th. But going forward, we're going to have electronic poll books. We're going to have 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. We're going to have early voting on every election in Onondaga County for primaries and generals. So, and when do you have to change your affiliation for next year's primary? That's a great question, David. It's something that I should talk about in every cast. If you want to vote in next year's presidential primary, change your party registration today. It has to be done by October 12th, I think. 32 days before the general election. It has to be done this year in 2019 to vote in any of the primaries next year. So get it done today. Go to our website, ongov.net/elections, and fill out a form and send it in, or go to your DMV account and make sure you change, and then give us a call about a couple of weeks later, make sure it got in. Is it possible it will change this session if the legislation is proposed? No, I don't think so. Not for, usually those kind of legislations take effect a year later. It might change for next year, maybe for the presidential primary if legislation is proposed, but I can't stress this enough. There is no legislation out there to change this. There's always talk about it. There's always talk about bills to change it, but nothing has been proposed in this session. And we're in April. And while this session has been incredibly, a lot of the reforms have gone through, that is not one reform that I'm hearing is going to get out there and be changed. Maybe I'll be surprised. I've been surprised by a couple things that got passed this year that I didn't think were going to get passed, but I at least knew the bills were out there. I don't think the bill is going to get there and get through the system to get passed by the end of June when the session ends. So no, I wouldn't count on it. Change your registration. Will we get AVR this year? It might get passed in this session. I know both houses want to do some version of it. They're arguing over what kind of version it is. But I think they'll come together. They'll pass it, but it won't be effective till next year. So AVR, I think, will pass. But I can't always guess what Albany's going to do. But I think AVR will pass, but it will not take effect until next year. Crazy that legislation hasn't been proposed yet. Yeah, it's been 4 years since the last presidential primary. Everybody was up in arms about it. I personally believe that primaries should have a 90-day window. Because when you start walking petitions, we should know who is enrolled in that party so they can sign on that petition line. But it's crazy. Mark asks, will the counties and towns in New York State go to caucuses? Certain towns can, certain towns can't. I'll be honest, the move lately has been to get away from caucuses. And the reason it is to get away from caucuses is because caucuses are not very democratic. It's small d democratic. That means they have a caucus on a certain time period. It's maybe an hour long. It's held in the middle of the summer. You don't know when it's happening. There's no primary. So whoever wins the caucus wins the ballot. They're on the ballot line. There's no primary, so there's no opportunity to take it to the voters. There's no absentee ballots. There's no regulations, really. The parties are running it themselves, not the state. And the state, or myself, we have a vested interest in making sure that things are run properly, but we have no role in caucuses. Only towns that have under 10,000 voters, under 30, it may be 30,000. I can't remember the population, can do caucuses. So cities like the city of Syracuse can't. And we have the Raucous Caucus where, if a Republican wins a Democratic caucus, they get on the ballot on the Democratic line. That happened in Salina, and that is why Salina does not caucus on the Democratic side. And it's why most Republicans don't caucus. They have petitions, which has allowed 3 primaries in the Republican Party this year, Tully, Cicero, and Lysander. So their voters are going to choose who their nominees are, and I think that's exciting. It's especially exciting for the Democrats. And automatic voter registration, AVR. Sometimes I talk in nomenclature, and I should spell it out a little bit more. AVR is automatic voter registration, which means if you're a citizen and you're over 18 and you interact with a social agency or the DMV, you will be automatically registered to vote, as opposed to now where you have to sign up to register to vote. It's an opt-out system as opposed to an opt-in system, which means you could opt out of being registered, but that first initial step of registration would that barrier would be eliminated, and it would swell our voter rolls more. We show about 30% of the people who are 18 years of age and older that are eligible to be registered are not registered to vote. That would lessen that significantly. And this will be my last question because I do got to get going. What reforms would like to see in the petitioning process? I would love. I'm not going to touch that other question, David, about 60-year-old voting, but save it for next time. I'll talk about that then. But this is the last question. What reforms would you like to see in the petitioning process? I would love to get rid of it or reform it in a way. There's two reforms that I think I would be in favor of. Allowing the county parties to act like the state party, where if somebody gets a certain percentage of the nomination vote at their designating meetings, or the designation vote at their designating meetings, they get on the ballot for the primary. In the state, it's 25%. So I think that would be one solution. And then if you don't get 25%, you could always go out and walk petitions. Another solution is something that I'm in favor of, which is to have a filing fee instead of a petition process. Get rid of most of the petitions out there. Most of these petitions, these 450 petitions that came into Onondaga County, are going to be unopposed in a primary. Some of them are unopposed, period. And if that's the case, why are we making people go out there and do petitions? Let's have them file a filing fee. It may encourage people to get out there and have more contested races out there. And if you can't afford the filing fee, then you can go do the petition process. Or don't want to pay the filing fee, then you can do the petition process. And guess what? Then we can raise money for our local boards of elections to be able to run the elections. It's a high burden on a county seat that has to pay for these elections. If we had, say, instead of for every signature, you had $1 filing fee. So let's say you had a citywide primary, you have to pay $1,000 to have a filing fee instead of petitions. And again, you could go out and get petitions if you want to. The Board of Elections, I estimate, would raise, I think, around $250,000 at Onondaga County Board of Elections this year. That's a couple staffers. That's early voting. All of that money could be paid for through the petition process if we reformed it. So I would love to look at that. In fact, I know many of my commissioners, Republican and Democratic, throughout the state are looking at that to propose for next year. We'll see where it goes, but that's something that we're really looking forward to doing and to having. So, all right, that's it. Next week, you'll have to tune in next week to have me answer that question about will we get 16-year-olds voting in New York State. But we'll discuss the merits of that next week. Thank you very much. As always, please share this out there on the interwebs and so other people can see it. And tune in next week, and we'll be talking about OTB primaries, the challenge process, and where we go for the rest of the April. Bye-bye.